I stood there in our dimly lit dining room, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filling the air, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and nerves. It was our 15th anniversary, and I'd spent the whole day planning this dinner to remind Clarissa how much we still had together, how much I still loved her despite everything. The kids, well, just Marley now since she was the only one still at home, were supposed to be part of this too, a family moment. I'd even gone out and bought a small gift, nothing flashy, just something meaningful. My hand shook a little as I set the tiny box on the table in front of Clarissa, wrapped in simple silver paper with a red ribbon I'd tied myself. I'd practiced what I'd say all morning. 15 years, babe. We've made it through a lot. This is for you. But before I could even get the words out, she glanced at it, then at me, and rolled her eyes so hard I could almost hear them creak. You're still jobless, she said, her voice sharp like a knife cutting through the warm air. You couldn't even afford a decent gift, could you? I froze, my mouth half open, the words I'd rehearsed dying in my throat. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this wasn't about money, that I'd poured my heart into this night. But then Marley piped up from across the table, her teenage sneer cutting deeper than her mother's words. We don't need your cheap box, Dad. Take it and get out. She didn't even look up from her phone, just flicked her fingers like I was some annoying fly buzzing around her perfect life. I stared at them both, my wife, my daughter, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The candles flickered on the table, casting shadows that danced across their faces, and for a second, I couldn't move. My chest tightened, and I thought about yelling, about flipping the table, about demanding they at least open the damn thing and see what I'd done for them. But instead, something else came over me. I laughed. Not a big, loud laugh, just a quiet chuckle that slipped out before I could stop it. They looked at me like I'd lost my mind, Clarissa's eyebrows shooting up, Marley finally glancing away from her screen. You sure about that? I asked, keeping my voice steady, almost playful. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, watching them squirm just a little. They didn't know what was in that box. They didn't know what I'd been hiding, what I'd been building while they wrote me off. Clarissa shoved the box back toward me with the back of her hand, like it was trash, and stood up. Get out, she said, her tone flat and final. Marley nodded, smirking like she'd won something. I grabbed the box, tucked it under my arm, and walked to the door without another word. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I heard the lock click behind me. My car was parked in the driveway, the same beat-up sedan I'd been driving for years, and I slid into the driver's seat, the box resting on my lap. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside, proof of everything they'd thrown away. I started the engine and pulled out, the streetlights blurring past me as I drove into the night. A week later, my phone started buzzing. Clarissa's name flashed on the screen, then Marley's, over and over. Voicemails piled up, texts too, but I didn't answer. I just sat there in my borrowed room at Uncle Reuben's place, sipping coffee, staring at the little box on the table in front of me. They'd figure it out soon enough. They'd realize what they'd pushed away. And when they did, I'd be ready. Not with anger, not with tears, but with the quiet strength I'd been holding onto all along. I leaned back in the chair, letting the phone vibrate again, and smiled to myself. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 10 years ago, life felt like a dream I didn't want to wake up from, and I can still see it so clearly when I close my eyes. I was standing in the kitchen of our old house, the one with the creaky floors and the big bay window, flipping pancakes while Marley giggled at the table, her little hands sticky with syrup. She was 6 then, all wide eyes and messy pigtails, begging me to make the pancakes into Mickey Mouse shapes. Daddy, make his ears bigger, she'd say, and I'd laugh, pouring extra batter just to see her smile. Clarissa would come in, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild mess from sleep, and she'd wrap her arms around me from behind, kissing my neck like we were still newlyweds. You're spoiling her, she'd tease, but her voice was warm, full of love. Back then, I was somebody, running my own engineering firm, small but growing, pulling in contracts that paid for that house, the vacations, the life we had. I'd built it all from scratch, late nights sketching designs, early mornings pitching to clients, and it felt good to see Clarissa proud of me, to hear Marley brag to her friends about her dad's cool job. I thought we were unbreakable, the three of us, a team against the world. But then the deal went bad. It was one big project, a bridge redesign for the city, and I'd sunk everything into it, every dollar, every hope. When the client pulled out last minute, claiming budget cuts. My firm took the hit. Creditors came knocking, bills piled up, and I had to let my team go, one by one, until it was just me in an empty office, staring at a phone that wouldn't ring. I sold the company for pennies, just enough to keep us afloat, but the damage was done. Clarissa's warmth faded first. She stopped hugging me in the mornings, stopped asking how my day was. "You need to figure this out," she'd say, her voice clipped, like I was a problem she had to solve. I tried. I took freelance gigs, fixed cars on the side, even drove for one of those rideshare apps, but it was never enough. The house went into foreclosure, and we moved into a smaller place, a rental with thin walls and a leaky roof. Marley was 10 by then, and I noticed her pulling away too. She'd roll her eyes when I tried to read her stories at night, muttering, "I'm not a baby, Dad," and I'd laugh it off, thinking it was just growing up. But it wasn't. She started copying Clarissa, parroting her complaints. "Why can't we have nice things anymore?" And I'd catch them whispering sometimes, glancing at me like I was the outsider. I kept hustling, picking up odd jobs, anything to put food on the table, but in their eyes, I wasn't the man I used to be. They didn't see the hours I spent trying to rebuild, the nights I stayed up worrying about how to make it right. They saw the fancy life I'd given them before, the big house, the trips to the coast, the clothes, and they loved that, not me. I'd come home from a long day, hands greasy from fixing someone's engine, and Clarissa wouldn't even look up from her phone. "You smell like oil," she'd say, wrinkling her nose, and Marley would giggle like it was a joke. I'd stand there in the doorway, feeling smaller every time, wondering where my family went. I tried talking to Clarissa once, late at night when Marley was asleep. "We can get through this," I said, reaching for her hand across the couch. She pulled away, her eyes cold. "You lost everything, Tom. What's there to get through?" That stung worse than anything, worse than losing the firm, because I realized she didn't believe in me anymore. Marley stopped asking for pancakes, stopped calling me daddy. She'd walk past me in the hall, earbuds in, like I was invisible. I kept going, though, scraping by, telling myself it'd get better, that they'd see I was still fighting for them. But deep down, I knew something had broken, something I couldn't fix with hard work or time. They didn't want the man I was now, just the life I'd lost. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like an itch I couldn't scratch, and it had been gnawing at me for months. It started small, Clarissa coming home later than usual, her heels clicking on the floor past midnight. She'd say it was work, that her job at the marketing firm was demanding more hours, and I'd nod, trying to believe her. "Okay, just don't burn yourself out," I'd say, forcing a smile, but she'd barely look at me, muttering something about deadlines before disappearing into the bedroom. I wanted to trust her God. I did, but the signs kept piling up, little things that didn't add up. Her perfume lingered stronger some nights, a sharp floral scent that wasn't the one I'd bought her years ago for Christmas. She'd brush it off if I asked, saying it was a sample from a client, but it stuck with me, that smell, like a stranger had walked through our house. Then there was Marley, my little girl who wasn't so little anymore, 16 now, and acting like I was some kind of burden. She'd always been close to her mom, but lately she'd gotten worse, rolling her eyes every time I opened my mouth, muttering under her breath when I asked how school was. "You wouldn't get it, Dad," she'd say, her voice dripping with that teenage attitude. But it felt personal, sharper than it used to be. I'd catch her on her phone, texting nonstop, her fingers flying over the screen, and if I walked into the room, she'd tilt it away, whispering into it like I was the enemy. It made my stomach twist, wondering what they were saying about me behind my back. I tried to ignore it, told myself I was paranoid, that losing the company had messed with my head. But then I saw it, the message that cracked everything wide open. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Clarissa had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she ran to the store. I wasn't snooping, I swear, just grabbing a glass of water, but the screen lit up with a ping, and there it was, bold as day, dinner at our place next time. Can't wait to see you again. Signed, Gregory. Her boss. My heart stopped, then started pounding so hard I thought it'd bust out of my chest. I stood there, staring at those words, my hand shaking around the glass. Gregory, tall, slick, always in those tailored suits, the guy who'd show up at company parties with a grin that made me feel small even when I was still on top. I'd met him a few times, shaken his hand, watched him charm the room while I stood there with my cheap beer. And now he was in my life, in my house, in my wife's head. I clicked the email thread, stupid, maybe, but I had to know, and it was all there. Months of messages, flirty at first, then outright planning. Lunch tomorrow? Missed you last night. He doesn't suspect a thing. That last one hit me like a punch to the gut. He was me. I was the fool who didn't see it coming. I closed the laptop, my hands sweaty, and sat down hard on a stool, trying to breathe. Clarissa wasn't just cheating, she was building a whole new life without me, and she was dragging Marley into it. I thought back to those whispers, the way Marley smirked when Clarissa brushed me off, how she'd started calling me embarrassing in front of her friends. It wasn't just teenage rebellion, she was learning it, soaking it up from her mom like a sponge. Clarissa wanted out, and she was making sure Marley hated me enough to follow her, to leave me behind without a second thought. I heard the front door open, Clarissa's keys dingling as she walked in, and I stood up, shoving the stool back. She froze when she saw me, her eyes flicking to the laptop, then to my face. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, casual, like nothing was up. I wanted to scream, to throw the laptop at her, to demand why him, why now, why us. But I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw someone I didn't know anymore. "Nothing," I said, my voice low, steady. "Just thinking." She shrugged and walked past me, that damn perfume trailing behind her, and I knew right then, she wasn't mine anymore. Neither of them were. I couldn't let it sit there, festering inside me like some rotten thing, so I decided to confront her that night. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you until you can't breathe. Marley was upstairs, probably glued to her phone, and Clarissa was in the living room, flipping through a magazine like everything was normal. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a second, her perfect hair, her manicured nails, the way she sat like she owned the world, and I felt this mix of anger and sadness boiling up. I'd seen the emails, I knew about Gregory, and I couldn't pretend anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. She didn't even look up at first, just turned a page and sighed like I was interrupting her. "What now, Tom?" she said, finally glancing at me, her eyes cold and impatient. I took a step closer, my hands clenched at my sides, trying to keep calm. "I know about Gregory," I said, straight out, no dancing around it. "I saw the messages. You're not even trying to hide it anymore, are you?" For a second, she froze, her fingers hovering over the magazine, and I thought maybe she'd deny it, maybe she'd cry or apologize. But then she laughed, sharp and mean, like I'd told her a bad joke. "Oh, you finally figured it out," she said, tossing the magazine onto the coffee table and leaning back on the couch. "Took you long enough." I stood there, stunned, my mouth dry, waiting for something, anything, to make sense. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "You're just done with me? With us?" She smirked, crossing her arms, and it was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. "You think I want to spend my life with a has-been?" she said, every word slicing into me. "Greg takes care of me. He respects me. He's got a future, something you haven't had in years." I wanted to yell, to tell her I'd been trying, that I'd never stopped fighting for us. But then Marley's footsteps thudded down the stairs, and she stopped at the bottom, staring at us. Her hair was tied back, her face blank, and she didn't say a word, just stood there, watching. I looked at her, my little girl, hoping she'd say something, anything, to show she still cared. But she didn't. She just crossed her arms like her mom, silent, picking her side without even opening her mouth. Clarissa kept going, like Marley being there made her bolder. "This is his house now," she said, nodding toward the walls I'd painted, the furniture I'd hauled in when we moved here. "Greg's moving in soon. If you want to stay, you better start contributing something useful. Rent, maybe, since you can't do much else." My head spun, and I felt sick, like the floor was dropping out from under me. His house. This was my home. Our home. The place I'd sweated to keep even after the company tanked. And now she was handing it over to some slick bastard who'd probably never lifted a finger for her the way I had. I looked at Marley again, searching her face for a crack, a hint of the kid who used to hug me goodnight, but she just stared back, her eyes hard, like I was nothing to her. "You agree with this?" I asked her, my voice breaking a little. She shrugged, barely moving her shoulders, and muttered, "Whatever Mom says." That was it, the knife twisting deeper. They teamed up, decided I was disposable, a dead weight they could cut loose. I could have fought, could have screamed that I'd built this life for them, that I loved them through every failure, every late bill, every cold night. But standing there, with Clarissa smirking and Marley looking through me, I saw the truth. They didn't care. They hadn't for a long time. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to unclench, and something shifted inside me. Anger turned cold, sharp, like a tool I could use. "Fine," I said, my voice steady now, low and quiet. Clarissa raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to beg or break, but I didn't. I just nodded, slow and deliberate. "You want me gone? I'm gone. But you're gonna regret this." She laughed again, waving me off like I was a kid making empty threats. But I wasn't. I turned and walked out of the room, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood, and I didn't look back. Upstairs, I grabbed a duffel bag, stuffed it with some clothes, my toothbrush, a few things I couldn't leave behind. The whole time, I kept thinking, not about losing them, but about what I'd do next. They thought I was finished, a washed-up nobody with nothing left. They were wrong. I'd been down before, and I'd climbed back up. This time, I'd do it smarter, quieter, and when they realized what they'd thrown away, I'd be the one laughing. I sat on the edge of the lumpy guest bed at Uncle Reuben's place, the little box from the anniversary dinner resting in my hands, and I let my mind drift back to something Clarissa never knew about, something nobody did. Before the company went under, back when I still had a bit of cash and a lot of hope, I'd made a move that seemed crazy at the time. My old college buddy Sanjay had come to me one night, all jittery and excited, practically begging me to invest in his tech startup. "It's a game changer, Tom," he'd said, his eyes wide over beers at some dive bar. "AI software for small businesses. Nobody's doing it like this. I just need seed money to get it off the ground." I'd been doing well then, my firm pulling in steady contracts, so I wrote him a check for $80,000, most of my personal savings, without telling Clarissa. She'd have freaked out, called it a gamble, and maybe she'd have been right. After that, I forgot about it. The company crashed, life got messy, and Sanjay's little project slipped out of my head. I figured it had fizzled out like most startups do, and I wasn't about to dig through old bank statements to check. But 2 years ago, I got a call from him out of the blue. "Tom, you still alive?" He'd laughed, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Man, you're not gonna believe this. We're going public. That $80,000 you gave me? It's worth something now." I'd been in the middle of fixing a neighbor's lawnmower for $20, grease up to my elbows, and I almost dropped the phone. Turns out, his company had taken off quietly at first, then like a rocket. They built some AI tool that every small business in the country wanted, and when they IPO'd, my shares shot up. I didn't tell anyone, not even Uncle Reuben. I just kept reinvesting, letting it grow, watching the numbers climb in silence while Clarissa and Marley treated me like a loser. Last month, I'd finally cashed out a chunk of it, enough to make me a multimillionaire, more money than I'd ever dreamed of back when I was scrambling to pay the rent. I'd moved it into a new account, separate from the joint one Clarissa still dipped into, and I started planning. That box I'd handed her at the dinner? It wasn't some cheap trinket. Inside was a folder, documentation for a new company I'd set up with Sanjay's help, a luxury vacation deed for a beach house I'd bought outright, and a black credit card with no limit, tied to my new fortune. I'd wanted to show her, to say, "Look, I'm back, better than ever. We can start over." But she didn't even open it, just shoved it away like it was garbage, and Marley backed her up, kicking me out of my own life. Now, sitting in Reuben's spare room, the box felt heavier than it should have. I flipped it open, staring at the papers inside, the sleek black card glinting under the dim lamp. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the weight of what it meant, not just money, but power, a second chance I'd built from nothing. I thought about Clarissa's sneer, Marley's smirk, the way they looked at me like I was less than dirt. They had no idea what I'd been hiding, what I'd turned into while they were busy writing me off. I could have gone back that night, waved the card in their faces, told them I was worth more than Gregory and his fancy suits ever would be. But I didn't. I closed the box, set it on the nightstand, and leaned back against the headboard, the springs creaking under me. Revenge wasn't about flashing cash or rubbing it in. It was about letting them figure it out on their own, watching them scorn when the truth hit. I'd been a ghost in their world for years, invisible, useless in their eyes. Now, I was something else, a man with a plan, a man they'd underestimated. I pictured Clarissa's face when the bills started bouncing, when Gregory's promises fell apart, when Marley realized her perfect little life wasn't so perfect anymore. I didn't need to yell or fight. I just needed to wait. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet street, the moon hanging low over the trees. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My chest didn't feel tight. For the first time in years, I felt steady, like I was standing on solid ground again. They'd throw me out, sure, but they'd also set me free. And that box? It wasn't just a gift. It was proof I wasn't the man they thought I was. Not anymore. I stood in the kitchen that night, the anniversary dinner spread out on the table, roast chicken cooling, potatoes getting stiff, candles dripping wax onto the cloth I'd ironed just for this. I'd wanted it to be perfect, a chance to show Clarissa we could still fix things, that I wasn't the failure she saw me as. My hands were sweaty as I slid the little box across to her, the one with the papers, the deed, the card, everything I'd been hiding. Happy anniversary, I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be, hoping she'd hear the weight behind it. She barely glanced at it, her lips curling into that familiar sneer. What's this supposed to be? She said, pushing it back toward me without even touching the ribbon. Before I could answer, Marley chimed in, her voice sharp and bored. It's probably junk. Just leave, Dad. I looked at them, my wife, my daughter, and felt the air shift, like the room was closing in. I'd planned to tell them everything, to open the box and lay it all out. The money, the company, the life I could give them now. But they didn't give me a chance. Clarissa stood up, brushing her hands like she was done with me for good. Get out, she said, flat and cold, and Marley smirked, crossing her arms like she'd been waiting for this. I opened my mouth to argue, to say something, anything, but then the front door creaked open, and there he was. Gregory. Tall, polished, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder like he owned the place. He strolled in, grinning, and dropped his keys on the counter, my counter, like it was his house already. Evening, folks, he said, his voice smooth, and he slid an arm around Clarissa's waist right in front of me. She leaned into him, laughing a little, and he grabbed my wine glass, the one I'd poured for myself, and filled it from the bottle I'd bought. Cheers, he said, raising it to me with a wink before taking a sip. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching him drink from my glass, his hand on my wife, my daughter smirking like it was some big win. The room spun for a second, and I felt this hot, jagged thing rise up in my chest, anger, hurt, humiliation, all mixed together. I could have lunged at him, smashed the glass out of his hand, demanded they all listen. But I didn't. Something clicked instead, something cold and clear. I looked at Clarissa, her eyes locked on Gregory like I wasn't even there, and Marley, tapping away on her phone, probably texting her friends about how pathetic I was. They didn't deserve the truth, not yet. I picked up the box, tucked it under my arm, and forced a smile, small and tight. All right, I said, my voice steady, almost light. I'll go. Clarissa raised an eyebrow, like she expected me to beg, but I just turned and headed for the door. Gregory called after me, take care, Tom, his tone dripping with fake pity, and I heard Clarissa laugh again as I stepped outside. The night air hit me hard, crisp and sharp, and I walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. I slid into the driver's seat, the box on my lap, and sat there for a minute, staring at the house, our house, my house, lights glowing through the windows. I could still hear them inside, their voices faint, probably joking about how I'd slunk off like a kicked dog. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, and I thought about going back in, unloading everything, telling them I was a millionaire now, that I'd outdone Gregory 10 times over. But I didn't. I started the engine, the rumble filling the silence, and pulled out of the driveway. As I drove away, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror, that smile stayed on my face, not big, not loud, just there. They'd remember it later, that quiet little grin, when they realized what they'd lost. I wasn't running. I wasn't broken. I was done playing their game. The road stretched out ahead, dark and empty, and I felt lighter than I had in years. They thought they'd won, kicking me out, replacing me with that smug bastard. But they didn't know what I had in that box, what I'd been building while they laughed. I turned up the radio, some old rock song buzzing through the speakers, and let the miles roll by. Uncle Reuben's place wasn't far, and I'd crash there tonight, figure out the rest tomorrow. For now, I just drove, the weight of the box a reminder, not of failure, but of power. They'd changed everything that night, sure, but not the way they thought. They'd set me loose, and I was ready to rise. I woke up the next morning on Uncle Reuben's old couch, the springs digging into my back, the smell of strong coffee pulling me out of a restless sleep. My duffel bag sat in the corner, the little box perched on top like a silent promise, and I could still hear Clarissa's voice from last night, "Get out," echoing in my head. Reuben shuffled in, his gray hair sticking up, a mug in each hand. "Told you she was poison," he said, gruff as always, handing me the coffee. I took it, the heat seeping into my palms, and nodded. "Yeah, you did," I said, my voice scratchy from the night. He didn't push, just sat across from me in his beat-up recliner, sipping his drink, letting me think. I'd crashed here after driving away from the house. The image of Gregory pouring wine into my glass burned into my brain. But sitting there, with the morning light creeping through the blinds, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake, really awake, for the first time in years. Ruben's place was small, cluttered with old tools and fishing gear, but it was solid, a lifeline I could grab onto. "What's the plan, kid?" he asked, eyeing me over his mug. I leaned back, the coffee bitter on my tongue, and let the pieces fall into place. I wasn't going back to that house, not to beg or fight. I was done with that life. "I'm building something," I said, slow and sure. "Something new." He grunted, a half-smile tugging at his mouth. "About damn time." That day, I got to work. I drove downtown in my rattling sedan, the box-riding shotgun, and met with a realtor I'd found online. She was a no-nonsense woman named Linda, all sharp edges and quick questions, and within hours, I'd leased a penthouse, top floor, big windows, a view of the city that made my old life look small. I didn't blink at the price. The black card in that box could handle it. I stood in the empty space later that afternoon, the hardwood floors gleaming, the skyline stretching out below, and felt my shoulders loosen. This was mine, nobody else's. Next, I called Sanjay. "Need an assistant," I told him. "Someone good, full-time." He laughed, that same excited laugh from the bar all those years ago. "You're really doing this, huh? I'll send you someone tomorrow." By the next day, I had Tara, young, sharp, with a clipboard and a knack for keeping things moving. She didn't ask about my past, just nodded when I said I was starting a venture capital firm. "What's the name?" she asked, pen poised. I thought about it, staring out at the city. "Silverline Ventures," I said. A new line, a new start. We set up shop fast, laptops, a desk, a phone line, and I pulled more cash from my account, the one Clarissa didn't know about. I'd been funneling money there for months, ever since I sold those shares, and now it was time to use it. I started scouting startups, small outfits like Sanjay's had been, places with big ideas and no capital. I'd been on the other side once, begging for a chance, and now I could give it. Silverline Ventures wasn't just a name, it was me, back in the game, stronger than before. Clarissa and Marley didn't cross my mind much those first few days. I was too busy, too focused. Tara handled calls, I met with founders, and Ruben dropped by with takeout, grumbling about the traffic but grinning when he saw the penthouse. "Not bad, kid," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I was building in silence, brick by brick, and it felt good, damn good, to be the one in control again. Then the letters started showing up. The first one came a week after the dinner, forwarded from the old address to Ruben's. Clarissa's handwriting, neat and slanted, on a plain envelope. I didn't open it, just tossed it on the kitchen table and kept moving. Another came 2 days later, then a third, each one thicker, like she was pouring more words into them. I didn't read those either. Marley sent one too, her messy scrawl a shock after all her silence, but I left it unopened with the rest. My phone buzzed sometimes, her number, then Marley's, but I let it go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear their voices yet. I knew what was coming. They'd figure it out soon. The money, the life I'd hidden, and they'd want back in. But I wasn't ready to let them. I stood on the penthouse balcony one night, the city lights twinkling below, a glass of whiskey in my hand. The air was cool, the world quiet except for the hum of traffic far off. I thought about that dinner, Gregory's smug face, Clarissa's laugh, Marley's smirk. They'd kicked me out, sure, but they'd also handed me this, a clean slate, a chance to rise without their weight dragging me down. I was back, stronger, richer, sharper. And when they came knocking, I'd be the one deciding who got in. I was sitting at my new desk in the penthouse, papers spread out, Tara typing away across the room. When I got the first hint it was starting to unravel for them. My phone buzzed, not Clarissa or Marley this time, but the bank. I'd pulled my name off the joint account the night before the anniversary dinner, a quiet move I'd made after seeing Gregory waltz in like he owned the place. The banker's voice was calm, professional. "Just confirming the mortgage payment bounced, sir. The account's overdrawn." I leaned back in my chair, a slow grin creeping across my face. "Not my problem anymore," I said. "I'm not on it." He paused, then said, "Understood," and hung up. I pictured Clarissa standing in the kitchen, staring at a declined card, her perfect little world cracking. She'd always handled the bills, dipping into that account like it was bottomless, never asking where the money came from. Well, it was my money keeping it afloat, and now it was gone. A few days later, I got a call from a guy I knew at the car dealership. "Hey Tom, just a heads up, your wife's lease on that SUV? It's in your name, and she missed the payment. We're repossessing it tomorrow." I chuckled, sipping my coffee. "Go ahead," I said. "I'm not paying it." The car was hers in every way but the paperwork. Shiny, black, the kind of thing she loved showing off. I could see her now, fuming as they towed it away, Marley whining about how she'd get to school. It wasn't spite, not really. It was just me stepping back, letting them feel the weight of their choices. The call started soon after. Clarissa first, her voice loud through the voicemail. "You better help us, Tom. This is your mess too." I didn't pick up, just let it play while I ate lunch. Ruben's leftover meatloaf, still better than anything she'd cooked lately. Then Marley, her tone sharp but shaky. "Dad, what's going on? Mom's freaking out. Call me back." I didn't. The house, the car, the bills, they'd built their life on me, and now the foundation was gone. I kept working, meeting with startups, signing checks with that black card, while their world fell apart. Word got around fast. A buddy from the old neighborhood texted me. "Saw Gregory peel out of your driveway last night. Looked pissed." I wasn't surprised. Sanjay had done some digging for me. Turns out Gregory's successful life was a house of cards. Bad investments, a failing side hustle, debts he couldn't pay. He'd been leaning on Clarissa's stability, her house, her money, my money, to prop himself up. When the mortgage bounced and the car vanished, he bolted. I laughed out loud when I heard, imagining her face when he walked out, leaving her with nothing but her pride. Marley started posting online, vague, dramatic stuff like everything's falling apart and people suck. I saw it on my phone one night, scrolling while Tara ordered takeout. The kid who'd smirked at me was crumbling, and part of me felt a pang. She was still my daughter, but it faded fast. She'd chosen her side. The calls changed after that. Clarissa's voice softened, desperate now. "Please, Tom, just talk to me. We can figure this out." Then Marley, quieter, almost scared. "Dad, I'm sorry. Can you call me?" I let them stack up, a dozen voicemails I didn't answer. They'd kicked me out, laughed me off, and now they were drowning. One night, I was on the balcony, the city humming below, a beer in my hand, when the phone rang again. Clarissa. I stared at it, the screen glowing in the dark, and something made me pick up. Her voice came through, small and shaky. "Tom? Oh God, please don't hang up. I miss you. Can we meet?" I let the silence stretch, listening to her breathe, picturing her in that house, empty now, no car, no Gregory, no money. "You threw away a diamond for costume jewelry," I said, my voice low, steady. She didn't say anything, just sniffled, and I hung up. That was it. No yelling, no begging, just the truth. I set the phone down, took a long sip of beer, and looked out at the lights. The fall had begun, and I didn't lift a finger to stop it. They'd made their bed, let them lie in it. I'd warned them at the dinner, that quiet, "You'll regret this," and now they did. The penthouse was warm behind me, Tara's laugh drifting out as she talked to someone on the phone, and I felt solid, rooted. They'd lost everything: Gregory, the house, the life, and I'd lost nothing that mattered. I was free, and they were stuck, scrambling for scraps I wouldn't give. The phone stayed quiet after that, and I knew they'd gotten the message. I wasn't their lifeline anymore. I was pushing a cart through the supermarket, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, when I saw her. Marley, standing by the discount bins, a bag of ramen noodles in her hand. It had been weeks since the last call, since I'd told Clarissa they'd thrown away a diamond, and I hadn't expected to run into either of them. She looked different, hair messy, pulled back in a sloppy ponytail, her hoodie sagging off one shoulder, no trace of the polished teenager who'd smirked at me that night. Her cart had a few cheap items: soap, a loaf of bread, some canned stuff. And I stopped, the wheels squeaking on the tile. She glanced up, and her eyes went wide, like she'd seen a ghost. "Dad?" she whispered, the ramen slipping a little in her grip. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking at her. Part of me wanted to walk away, to keep moving past the aisle like she wasn't there, but something held me back. "Hey," I said, my voice flat, not giving much away. She shifted, clutching the bag tighter, and took a step closer. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small, almost lost in the hum of the store. I nodded, slow and careful, and pushed my cart to the side, leaning against it. "Go ahead," I said. She swallowed, looking down at her sneakers, worn out, scuffed, and started talking. Things are bad, Dad. Really bad. Mom's a mess. The house is gone. We're in some crappy apartment now. Gregory left. And she cries all the time. I listened, my arms crossed, keeping my face steady. I could picture Clarissa unraveling without her perfect life, but I didn't feel the pull to fix it. Not anymore. Marley kept going, her words tumbling out. I didn't know it'd get like this. I thought Mom was right, that you were just, I don't know, holding us back. But now everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do. She looked up at me then, her eyes wet, pleading. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean it. All that stuff I said. I took a deep breath, the air cold from the freezers nearby, and let her words settle. I'd waited for this, hadn't I? For them to see what they'd done, to come crawling back? But hearing it didn't feel like a win. It just felt heavy. You were a kid, I said, my voice low but firm. You followed her lead. I get that. But you stood there, Marley, while she kicked me out. You laughed with her. That's not something I can just forget. Her face crumpled a little, and she nodded, wiping her nose with her sleeve. I know, she said. I messed up. I miss you. I didn't realize how much until now. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the girl she used to be, my little shadow, the one who'd climb into my lap and beg for stories. But that was gone, buried under years of her choosing Clarissa's side. Trust's a hard thing, I said. Once it's broken, it doesn't snap back together overnight. You hurt me, Marley, both of you did. I'm not saying never, but I'm not ready to pretend it didn't happen. She nodded again, tears spilling now, and I felt that old ache in my chest, the one that came from loving her even when she turned away. Okay, she whispered. I just wanted you to know. I didn't hug her, didn't promise anything, I couldn't yet. I just gave her a small nod and said, take care of yourself, before pushing my cart past her. The rest of the shopping felt mechanical, my hands grabbing cereal and milk while my mind churned. That night, an email popped up from Clarissa. Tom, I was angry. I was stupid. Please, let's have coffee. I stared at it, the cursor blinking, and typed back. The man you insulted is gone. The man you need now doesn't exist for you. I hit send and closed the laptop. She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. I sat on the penthouse couch, the city lights glowing through the windows, and thought about Marley's face, lost, scared, sorry. I'd meant what I said. Trust was a slow build, and they'd torched it. But she was my kid, and that tugged at me, even if I didn't want it to. I didn't owe them anything, not after what they'd done, but I wasn't sure I could cut them off forever either. Not yet. I got up, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window, watching the world move below. They were falling, and I was rising, and maybe someday there'd be a middle ground. But for now, I let them sit with it, their choices, their regrets, while I kept building, step by step, on my own terms. I stood in the penthouse kitchen a year later, the smell of grilled steak and garlic bread wafting through the air, the clink of glasses and laughter filling the space. It was a quiet dinner party, nothing flashy, just the people who'd stuck by me, the ones who mattered. Uncle Reuben was there, leaning back in a chair with a beer, his gravelly voice cutting through the chatter as he told some old fishing story. Sanjay sat across from him, grinning, his tie loosened after a long day, toasting me with a glass of red wine. To the man who bet on me when nobody else did, he said, and I raised my glass back, feeling the warmth of it settle in my chest. Tara was there too, my assistant-turned-friend, joking with the small team I'd built at Silverline Ventures, good people, sharp and loyal, who'd helped turn my little firm into something real. And then there was Nora, sitting next to me, her dark hair catching the light, her laugh soft but bright. I'd met her a few months back at a business conference, smart, steady, with a way of seeing through bullshit that reminded me of Reuben. She wasn't pushy, didn't need anything from me, just showed up with her dry humor and kind eyes, and somehow, she'd become part of this new life. We'd been taking it slow, no labels, just dinners and late-night talks, but having her here tonight felt right. The table was crowded with plates, steak, potatoes, a big salad Reuben insisted on making, and the city lights twinkled outside, framing us like a picture I never thought I'd have. I looked around, soaking it in, and realized Clarissa and Marley hadn't crossed my mind all night. They were ghosts now, shadows from a life I'd left behind. After that supermarket run-in with Marley, after Clarissa's unanswered email, they'd faded out. No more calls, no more letters, just silence. I'd heard through the grapevine they'd moved somewhere cheaper, that Clarissa was working some low-end job that Marley was scraping by at community college. I didn't check, didn't dig. They weren't my story anymore. We finished eating, and I stepped onto the balcony, the cool air brushing my face, a glass of whiskey in my hand. Nora followed me out, leaning on the railing beside me, her shoulder close but not touching. "Nice night," she said, her voice easy, and I nodded, staring at the skyline. "Yeah, feels good." She didn't ask about the past, she never did, but I could tell she knew there was weight behind my quiet. Inside, Ruben's laugh boomed, Sanjay's voice rising over it, and I smiled to myself. This was my family now, the real one, not blood, not obligation, but choice. I set the glass down and pulled the little box from my pocket, the same one from that anniversary dinner, the one Clarissa had shoved away. I'd kept it, not for them, but for me. I flipped it open, the papers still inside, the black card glinting, and I took out a pen from my jacket. On a scrap of paper, I wrote, "To the man I used to be. Thank you for surviving." I folded it, slipped it into the box, and closed the lid, feeling lighter than I had in years. Nora glanced over, curious but not prying. "What's that?" she asked, her tone light. "Just a note," I said, sliding the box back into my pocket. "Saying goodbye to some old stuff." She nodded, like she got it, and we stood there, the city humming below, the stars faint above. I thought about that night a year ago, Clarissa's sneer, Marley's smirk, Gregory's smug grin, and how it pushed me here. They'd meant to break me, to toss me out like trash, but instead, they'd handed me a way out. I'd risen quietly, built this life step by step, and now I was standing taller than ever. The dinner party wound down, Ruben clapping me on the back as he left, Sanjay promising to call about a new deal, Tara hugging me quick before heading out. Nora stayed, helping me stack plates, her presence steady and calm. "Good crew," she said, drying a glass, and I nodded. "The best." Later, alone on the balcony again, I looked at the box one last time, then set it on the ledge. It wasn't about them anymore, Clarissa, Marley, the betrayal. It was about me, the man I'd become, the one who'd survived and thrived. I toasted the air, the city, the future, and let the past slip away for good.